From the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
Welcome to Broncos Country Tonight. We are joined in studio by the one and only Hall of Famer, Steve Atwater. What up, Steve?
What up, R. Edwards? What's up, Benjamin Allbright?
Is that a mile-high salute in there?
That's right, baby, always.
Love that. Well, we're going to talk a little defense with you today. We love doing that. Alexander Johnson spoke earlier this week. Now, he talked about the rotation of inside linebackers. Now, I think Alexander Johnson likes playing next to Josie Jewell. He's been pretty consistent with that message. But what do you think about that? Do you think there should be more of a rotation at that position?
Well, for me, as a player, and I'm sure that's probably how most of the guys feel, players don't like rotating. You get into a certain groove by being on the field, getting the feel of seeing different things, and you just get into a rhythm. And, you know, to play a couple of plays and have to come out. Now, if there's a mismatch, then that's a whole different story. You know, if they're bringing in a personnel that you don't match up well against, then you got to rotate. You got to bring in some players, but it's normally a different position. But rotating with the same position, players don't like that.
Okay, well, Ben, you've been adamant for a while now. We're going to see a lot more dime this year. It would stand to reason based on all their additions to the secondary. So I guess in that same vein, the rotation almost sort of takes care of itself in some ways, even if it's not a linebacker necessarily rotating in.
Yeah, it is going to take care of itself. And Steve's right, though. Like, what players like, you know what? I'd really like to come off the field and let this other guy get my snaps. Like, who, you know? I mean,
well, I would say the one position I think where that plays well is defensive line position, right? Because sometimes those guys get bloated like, come get me.
I need the breather mask.
Yeah. Or they'll come off so they can be on the field on third down so they can have a chance to get a sack.
Pass rushers,
be a little energized on third
right.
down. I mean, I would never come off and just save my energy for third down. I would never.
Yeah, pass rushers, D-line. But, yeah, you're right. Inside linebackers, starting corners, I think a lot of those guys like to be on the field a lot.
If you're in man, though, you kind of sometimes you might want a little bit of a breather if you've been chasing guys around. I know when Vance was running the defense, they ran a lot of man stuff, and some of those corners were getting a little tired toward the fourth quarter.
Man, I tell you, back in the day, if you were playing, you were playing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess that makes sense. And obviously for Alexander Johnson, it doesn't necessarily matter about rotation. I think that's more of a conversation on matchups, right? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And there might be game in, game out where you say, well, we think that we can have an advantage here by playing a little bit more with DB heavy versus going with the heavier linebackers in other games where you're playing against a very stout run.
Right.
That's maybe a little bit of the distinction there. I want to switch it up a little bit on Alexander Johnson, though, because Vic Fangio had an interesting kind of thing that he'd like to see him work on. He said he needs to become more assignment and technique conscious and a more fundamental player. Mm-hmm. Alexander Johnson admitted he freelanced a bit. He said that he wasn't always gap sound. And you and I have gone round and round about being guys that freelance, and sometimes that can just make everybody look bad. So I guess what it comes down to, is that a trust thing? Is that a player needing to turn off the instincts in the back of their head? What is that when players are wanting to freelance?
Well, I think that's exactly what it is. They don't trust their teammates. You know, now they wouldn't come out and say, I don't trust my teammates, but their actions on the field show that. And many times it can be a little bit confusing, especially if you don't know where your defensive linemen are supposed to be. If you're thinking they're going to go to the A gap and you have the B gap and someone else has the C gap, then if you see him hang out over here in the B gap and then you say, all right, he's over there, and you go to the A gap, now guess what? In the last minute, he goes to the A gap. Now guess whose responsibility that is? That's your responsibility. And this is a time in football where players have got to say, look, if somebody's going to be wrong, it ain't going to be me. This is not a time to try and cover for people, because defensive linemen, sometimes they don't get off until the last minute. They're doing some type of move and, they're using their hands to get off. And at the last minute, they'll get back into the right place. And if you don't trust them and you try to be there too, guess what? It's on you.
Yeah, you're going to be out of position, and you've got to. Everybody needs to know their assignments. I think that was part of the thing last year too. Not just getting off like that, but you also had guys that were down roster defensive linemen that hadn't had many reps. McTelvin Ageen was playing a lot last year. Didn't know a couple of times where he was supposed to be. That's why when coaches talk about getting lined up and knowing gap assignments and all that kind of stuff, that's what they're talking about, because it affects everybody behind you. You can't see behind you. You have to trust that guy's there, and the guy who's behind you has to trust that the guy's going to be in the right spot when what he sees and what he knows.
Right.
Okay, so there's the trust.
And I would say it's better to say, okay, defensive lineman, you're supposed to be in the A gap, but if you're in the B gap, we're both going to be in the B gap. Mm-hmm. And then expose it. You got to expose it so the defensive lineman knows I can't make this mistake again versus covering up. But now nobody knows what they're doing. Defensive lineman like, oh, man, he made the play, and the linebacker's like, oh, I did the right thing. But no, that's not sound defense.
Well, your tape is your DNA as a player, and when you go back to the tape, if you're in the right, if you're both in the same spot, one of you is wrong, and you're going to figure it out on tape.
Right.
But if you're both in the wrong spot, then it just both of you look like you're wrong and look like you're freelancing. You both get blamed.
But how do you work with the instincts portion of that? Because as a player, that's kind of what you have to function on, right? You know,
that has nothing to do.
Your job.
That has nothing to do with it. Instincts take over once you know what you're doing.
Okay.
Once you're in the right place, then your instincts take over. You go over and get low, make the play, and do all this stuff. The rest of it is guessing or using your intuition. And many times it doesn't work. And I've seen some of the great players. Ronnie Lott, I heard stories of Ronnie Lott from him watching film, him being on the line of scrimmage, just cover two. He's got deep halves. He blitzes and tackles the guy in the backfield. But, hey, not many people can do that.
Well, right. And so then it becomes on the coaching staff, not to necessarily tell the players don't use your instincts, because you want guys to be special. You want guys to make special plays, but you kind of have to, we always say, crawl, walk, run. Mm-hmm. I don't know if the defense is there, though, because the defense, I feel like we're farther along than crawl. And I think Alexander Johnson has a higher ceiling than crawl to walk. I think we're in the run phase with him.
Yeah, the Broncos defense at this point in this many years under Vic Fangio should be in the light jog to sprint phase. We're not in crawl or walk. Yeah. If you are, you got a problem there. Now, the offense, I get it. They're young. It's only their second year under Pat Shurmur. They might be in the crawl, walk, phase of that and working towards walk to jog. But, if you're Alexander Johnson at this point, you got to understand your assignment. You've been in this defense for 2+ years. You got to understand where you're supposed to be, know where you're supposed to be, and do what you're supposed to do. Even if you have elite instincts and all that kind of stuff, you don't have the cachet. You're not an all-pro player. You don't have the cachet to be out there overriding the coach on the field. Do what the coach tells you until you've gotten to the point where you have that cachet to be able to do that. You're not Justin Simmons.
And then I'll say also, that's one thing is the fit on the run plays, but then when you're dropping back into especially zone coverage and man-to-man coverage, you pretty much know who you got. Right. And hey, if you win, that's a great thing. If you lose, hey, you gotta pick up pick it up and get ready to go again. But if that's an area where you can be a little bit more instinctive and play it by your height and how fast you are, how fast you can get to different points on the field. But you can use your instincts more there than I would say in the run game. In the run game, you got to be where you got to be. Otherwise, one small mistake can cost you big time.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Steve, thanks for the time, man.
Oh, thank you.
I appreciate it. When we come back, we're going to talk about the offensive line. Lloyd Cushenberry's comments this week to the media. Gets next.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight. Here are Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight. The Broncos this week finally getting some 11-on-11 practices in, and interesting comments from Dalton Reisner or Lloyd Cushenberry sort of talking about the value of those 11-on-11 practices. And I guess I kind of also tie in Vic Fangio, because every time Vic was asked about the right tackle and the competition there, he'd say, well, there's really just not much we can learn here in OTAs. And then Dalton Reisner kind of said, actually, the 11-on-11s are really valuable for us. It's the first time we have an opportunity to go see the defense, listen to their checks, have our checks. And he still thinks that the OTAs are very valuable, just building chemistry and that type of thing. But what do you think about the fact that the Broncos decided not to have very much team this year? And then now you're listening to the offensive line saying that was really valuable for us.
Well, I don't think what Dalton and what Vic said are mutually exclusive. I don't think that, from Vic and the evaluation standpoint, you can't determine which guy is your right tackle based on that. But for the offensive line, it is a bond, because the offensive line works as a unit. It's the one area or the one position group in football where if one guy isn't doing his job, it blows it for everybody. And so on the offensive side of the ball, on defense, obviously that's self-explanatory, but on the offensive side of the ball, it is. And so the weakest link on the that's how strong your line is. And so for Dalton, understanding, working, and getting that cohesion together, that's not mutually exclusive to not being able to evaluate right tackle and pick your poison here in OTAs. So the reps are valuable. Why did they do fewer of them? I think that was the compromise that they made with the players in order to kind of get everybody out there. Coaches like, well, we'll do more 7-on-7 reps. I just want the reps. And so I think that I think that's the balance. I think that's the compromise you make in the modern era in terms of less wear and tear on the body, but still getting the reps in.
And that's okay, and that's every team is kind of dealing with it in a lot of different ways. I just feel like this is a living, breathing kind of deal, right? What we're experiencing in OTAs this year, maybe a little bit different next year. They're going to continue to fine-tune and tweak that sort of thing. And again, getting feedback from the offensive line, from Mike Munchak, what he could do and use to get ready for the season. They're going to have a longer training camp, and they're going to have more preseason games, which will also help. Lloyd Cushenberry talked to us saying we've referenced this as it relates to Jerry Jeudy and some of the other rookies, but I don't think we've talked about it and framed it in the way for Cushenberry about how valuable and how much they appreciate having OTAs now when they didn't have it last year. They didn't have a rookie minicamp. They didn't have any of the offseason training. It was all Zoom related. And for Lloyd Cushenberry specifically, a guy that did need some seasoning. He needed some time. He needed some time working against pro-level defensive linemen. Think about just for him how that slowed his growth. We saw some improvements towards the end of the season like we saw for the rest of the offense, but I feel like when we talk about all the rookies, we need to kind of take each one by themselves and say what could have been if they had an entire offseason to work and to train.
Well, yeah, and there would have been more cohesion, a better understanding of the playbook, perhaps an understanding of functional strength and anchoring for Cushenberry, understanding the checks and line calls, more reps on how to do that, more confidence in how to do that. There's nothing but benefit in getting more reps other than the injury risk if you push yourself a little too hard. The rest of it, more reps is always good. More practice is always good. You're trying to get better, right?
Yeah, of course. And he was asked about Quinn Miners, and he gave what you sort of expected as a response about that. You know, he likes working with him, that sort of thing. But he was asked if he was surprised that they drafted a third-round center. It's a guy that can play interior offensive line, but the Broncos want to see him at center. And he said, no, it was expected. He's like, I expected them to do it based on my play. So an acknowledgement, too, that not only that he didn't play up to the standard that he wanted, so he's not, he's not blind to the fact that things didn't work out all season long as he wanted, but he appreciated, that Mike Munchak stuck with him. He said that meant a lot because it helped his confidence, it helped his growth, which I think is very valuable. And then he also said, I wanted the competition this year. And I actually think that shows a lot of maturity on his side.
That's certainly saying the right things. You'll see it out there on the field as far as that kind of stuff goes. It should have been expected. And, to be honest, most players, outside of wide receivers and corners, most players can identify when they weren't up to par. Wide receivers and corners are a different breed. They never believe they got beat, or they never believe that, it was always somebody else's fault that the ball didn't get to them, that kind of stuff. But the rest of the position players in the NFL, by and large, you could see that they absolutely know their weaknesses. They absolutely know if they didn't get the job done that year, and Lloyd knows that. And good. Okay. Self-awareness is that's a first step. So I think that, him saying that the Broncos drafting an offensive lineman to potentially push or replace him in the third round, place where he was drafted, doesn't surprise him. I think that's just facts. I think he knows that. I think he's very cognizant and very aware of the fact that you look around that offensive line, he was the weak link last year.
Is it fair to hope or expect, similar to what happened with Garrett Bowles, that a season in the Mike Munchak system, a season working with that coach, and then an entire offseason finally with him could be dramatic for his development, and we might see. I know you predicted that Quinn Miners will likely win that job, but let's just live in a world here where Mike Munchak helped Lloyd Cushenberry get to where he needs to be with his functional strength, gets to where he needs to be with his understanding of the playbook, and you at least had the continuity portion there, say if Drew Lock wins the job. Is it out of realm to believe that Lloyd Cushenberry could take a dramatic step forward this year?
You said, is it hope? And then you also said, is it, hope? Yeah, you could absolutely hope for that. I wouldn't expect it. Like, the expectation shouldn't be that he takes a flying leap to near all pro level. It would be nice. You could certainly hope for it. I think he should take a step forward. The areas of his game where he was deficient were easily identifiable, so those are easily things he could work on. It wasn't just a combination of things or something nebulous where it wasn't getting done. There were easily identifiable things. It's just a question of him taking to the coaching, applying himself as a student of that coaching, and then going out and physically executing what that concept is, what that coaching concept is.
But I guess we're going to probably know more about this in training camp.
We will.
Because
we'll
OTAs,
know by week 2 of training camp where we're at with this.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. All right, when we come back, we're going to stay on the offensive line. Pro Football Focus ranked the group. We'll get to it next.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight. Here are Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
Final segment here of Broncos Country Tonight. Let's talk a little more about the offensive line. Pro Football Focus ranked the Broncos 21st on their overall offensive line units. And I don't think this is too surprising in the sense that, as they pointed out here, they finished 25th last year in the rankings, and they had a 57.2 in their grading system, run blocking grade, which was 28th in the league. So for the Broncos, let's just start right there. If we're going to see improvement from the offensive line as a unit, as a group, what's it going to start with, in your opinion?
Well, let's go back to last year, and I felt like there was improvement in the pass protection function. Even though you had three different guys at right tackle, and Garrett Bowles stepped up, you weren't drawing as many penalties, and you were protecting the quarterback a little bit better. And I think that was the start, building towards that. They're going to have to get more push in the run game. Garrett Bowles is an excellent athletic offensive tackle, not the strongest guy out there. Lloyd Cushenberry, not the strongest guy out there. Graham Glasgow, not the strongest guy out there. And so, you're going to have to watch, and you're going to have to be cognizant of the fact that you've got guys behind you, Natani Moody and Quinn Meinerz, that are stronger than you, and that could add some push, to that run. That's what we need, is we need more push, more effective push, and getting vertical in the run game with the offensive line. I thought that they played better than the 25th best offensive line last year. I felt like they were better than that. There were times where, as we talked about, though, the weakest link being the center caused the whole thing to crumble. Go back and look at the Atlanta game, and you could just see it. That interior offensive line got worked, and it cost them the game.
And there were games in there. I mean, you had COVID games, obviously the Carolina Panthers game where you were replacing guys.
They played well, though. You're right.
Yeah,
right.
So,
they played well in that game, though.
Yeah, they did. And I thought that it was kind of on an upward slope for the whole year, for the entire of the offensive line. But you're right, in pass blocking, they only had they only gave it 13 sacks. They gave 32 sacks. They were 13th in the league.
It's a huge step up.
It's a pretty massive step up, and that's one of the things that we have lauded Drew Lock for. He doesn't take a lot of sacks. Now, in that Carolina game, for example, there was a miscommunication. He got hit. He fumbled the ball. Ended up giving a scoring chance to Carolina.
Right.
But the point being is that's a function of an improved offensive line. They also they almost gave 120 yards rushing on the ground, which was 13th. These are the only two statistical categories on the offense that were kind of upper half of the league. Everything else was lower half, if not bottom of the league, especially turnovers. So for me, I'm 100% with you. I think there's a lot of optimism about the offensive line. Now, one of the reasons that they're 21st, and it would have been interesting to see where this rank would have been if Juwan James was healthy. I think they would have been much higher, because there's just the expectation of Juwan James brings a lot more optimism. But they did acknowledge Bobby Massey, if he ends up being the guy, has been pretty solid right tackle for his career there with Chicago, and they feel like that's not necessarily a net negative for this team.
Right. He'll probably win the job. I mean, barring something strange happening, he should win the job. He is reliable. He's a solid guy. Not what you'd call elite, but he's certainly solid, and that's an upgrade over what they've had, which is unreliable and not good at that position for a long time. So, I expect the offensive line to be improved. I expect it to be better, and if it is indeed improved and better, this unit could carry this offense as it continues to kind of grow up and become what they expected. It could carry this offense. I mean, if you get a guy like Teddy Bridgewater time, he can make plays. You give Drew Lock time, he can make plays, and so either one of those quarterbacks and Melvin Gordon get a little bit of push and able to get yardage in a run game, who, by the way, averages the most yards after first contact, or 6 most yards after first contact in the NFL for a running back. That's a heck of an offense. That should be able to get you in the end zone.
And then you mix in, of course, Javonte Williams. I'm not doing this intentionally necessarily, because I think Melvin Gordon is the starter. But Javonte Williams, of course, led college football in broken tackles. So it's kind of a combination and a style of offense. They're more or less tipping their hand on what they'd like to be able to do. So you need functional quarterback play back there. And again, sacks, by the way, are a shared stat. That's not on the offensive line. It is also on the quarterback. And we saw instances of that even here.
Curious as to how many of those sacks came when Brett Rippon and Jeff Driscoll especially were back there versus Drew Lock.
That's a great point. I mean, you had 3 different quarterbacks out there, and we know Jeff Driscoll had a tendency to hold on to the ball for a really long time.
He got benched because of it.
That's exactly right. So that's a great point you bring up. I can't remember how many Rippon had in that Jets game, but I know he had a couple.
I'll find this out, because I need to know now. But
Jeff Driscoll was definitely one of those. And then again, Drew Lock. But again, you say, hey, 32 sacks for the whole season. You're 13th. The things you're trying to build on. And Mike Munchak, is coming into this where we are seeing some consistency on the offensive side of the ball. You kept your same OC. You kept a lot of the same coaching staff, Mike Munchak included in that. So that's where I say with the offensive line, there should be a level of optimism. And even Pro Football Focus points out in this article that they think that the offensive line should be better than that 21st ranking. If they are top half of the league, what does that mean for this offense?
That means this offense is hitting on all cylinders. They're probably scoring 28 points a game. If that offensive line is providing that kind of protection and that kind of push in the run game, then they are absolutely crushing it on offense. By the way, I did get the numbers real quick. Drew Lock had 19 sacks for the year. Jeff Driscoll in that game and a half had 11. Brett Rippon had 1. Kendall Hinton had 1.
Whew. That's right. We had 4 different quarterbacks. That's a good. Almost forget about the Kendall Hinton game, right?
Hall of Famer, Kendall Hinton.
Yeah, of course. But there you go. Okay, so you think that the key to unlocking all of this really comes back to the offensive line, more so than all the quarterback conversation. Not that it's not important, but a lot of the offensive line is.
The offensive line makes everything go. If you've got the protection for the quarterback, he's going to have time. Somebody's going to get open. They're going to have time to make a pass. If you have protection and push from the offensive line, the running back is going to get positive yardage and going to put you in short yardage situations, opening up the playbook and allowing you to dictate the defense. It all starts with the O-line. It ends with the O-line. They have to be improved.
All right. Love it. Thanks again to Steve Atwater for joining us earlier. For Benjamin Allbright, I'm Ryan Edwards. Thanks for watching Broncos Country Tonight.